On this episode, if there are three things that I can tell you what teenagers often tell me in my office that they wish that their parents would understand, it is this. First, I'm trying harder than you think in school. Second, video games are more than just wasting time. And three, my phone isn't just a screen, it's my lifeline. For many parents, poor grades, video games, and cell phones can be very frustrating and confusing at the same time. But sometimes it can make a parent feel often hypervigilant. But for many teenagers, they are often interconnected with pressure, identity, and a way to escape reality. How can we pause and take the moment to see it from both sides? Rather than arguing and saying that I'm the parent and what I say goes, we need to try to understand each other, both as the parent as well as the teenager, especially those with neurodivergence, because that does play a huge part in all of this. In today's episode, we're going to talk about the actual research that supports the struggles with academic challenges, video gaming, and phone use. I'm going to talk about the good, the bad, as well as the misunderstood, and how these things can negatively impact teenagers, both with their moods as well as their behaviors, but also why it's beneficial for teenagers with neurodivergence. Why do we think the way that we do? And what are we really thinking inside of our minds that shapes the way that we think, feel, and connect? Welcome to my podcast. I'm Andrew, a licensed marriage and family therapist and a mental health professional. Neurocurious is my podcast that explores the mind and curiosity with inspiration. From parenting and emotional development in relationships to mental health and everyday behavior, each episode is to explore the psychology we face as well as endure in real life. For about as long as I have been working with teenagers, they mention the same three things over and over again. It's often brought up almost all the time. So in this episode, I'm going to call it the big three. First, school, academic performance. So many teenagers are trying their absolute best, but they still feel like they're running short at times. They bring home that B even though that they were aiming for that A. And instead of feeling proud, they feel that they have disappointed their parents one way or another. And even though they tried their best, they still feel like they let themselves down. And so they feel, why bother? What's the point? Second, video games and screen time. For many parents, gaming looks like laziness, avoidance, a way of wasting time, and they might even say it's addicting. But for teenagers, it's often more than that. It's more than just entertainment. It can be an outlet to relieve stress, as well as social connection and even an escape from reality. And then third, their phones. Parents often see that their phones are huge distractions. However, for teenagers, their phones are their social life, their identity, their support system. It's a way that they're able to connect with the world around them. Sometimes I like to use a little analogy with Beauty and the Beast and Snow White, just like with the magic mirror. It's a way to connect to the outside world when they feel like they need to escape from the inside. There have been so many times that a parent would tell me, I've been a teenager. I know what it's like to be a teenager. Well, you know what? That's true. Me as well. I know what it's like to be a teenager. However, we were teenagers 20, 25 years ago. So you don't know what it's like to be a teenager today because it's not what it was 20 years ago. In fact, I truly believe that teenagers have it much harder in this generation today. In fact, if I was a teenager today, if I was going back to my 16-year-old self, that actually terrifies me to be a teenager today. And I mean, seriously, it is scary. But with the big three, it's pretty common. But with ADHD, it is huge. As I break down the big three, we're going to explore the conflict that parents often have with their teenagers, as well as look over the teenager's perspective and what sort of research is out there that supports the psychology behind each of that. Both the positive as well as the negative, in hopes to building understanding rather than pursuing that conflict, because sometimes it's just misunderstood. I had a young woman tell me once about her homework and exams that if it was not done right, then it is not perfect. I remember her telling me that she got a 98% on one of her tests, and I congratulated her. I was like, that's amazing. Great job. Well done. You must have worked so hard. And then she was really wishing that I wish that my father would say that, because he didn't seem to think so. And I was like, oh, Well, she shared with me that she was afraid to tell him about it because she did not get 100%. And then as we process this, instead of recognizing that she got a 98, that she got right, she was more focused and concerned about the 2% that she got wrong. So she was kind of beating herself up about this because of the one question that she got wrong. I should have known this. I was supposed to know this. I knew the answer, but I still selected the wrong one. So whether or not she got that 2%, we have to work through this because in a way, whether it's the 98 or 100%, you still got an A. But it did not matter because it wasn't perfect. She had stretched herself like a rubber band so far that it had snapped. Even though she did her absolute best, it still wasn't good enough for her. If it wasn't perfect, then she was wrong. Students having ADHD share very similar experiences. No matter how hard they try, it's just not enough for their parents. And so why do I even bother? Why do I even push myself to this? Because I'm not going to be able to meet my expectations, let alone theirs. So there is no doubt that they want that A. They want that A. We all want that A. Even though they study very, very hard, they still end up with a C. And they take it willingly. They take it with gratitude because it still means that they had passed. Barely, but they had passed. Teenagers with ADHD, they tend to deal with so many challenges in a school setting. Because of their symptoms, with the inattentiveness, impulsivity, as well as the hyperactivity, it can really disrupt their ability to learn as well as study, staying organized, and managing through their time that they can complete those tasks, including following through. Teenagers would say to me, I don't know why I didn't get a grade for this assignment. I finished it. And then I would follow up and say, well, did you submit the assignment? And they were like, well, I finished it. And I have to gently remind them, well, that's not what I asked. What I asked was, did you submit the assignment? And they're like, well, I didn't submit it, but I did finish it. I'm like, there's no point. When you submit your assignment, then you are finished. It's because of situations like this, grades often decline, and students are feeling more at risk of dropping out of school due to feeling overwhelmed and that they just can't do it. For teenagers with ADHD, a factor of this affects their school performance is self-efficacy. It's the confidence in their ability to succeed at specific tasks. Rather than recognizing their strengths and abilities, they are often reminded by parents as well as teachers that their limitations and their weaknesses is what's holding them back. Now, this reduces self-efficacy as well as self-esteem because it results in poor academic achievement and it could lead into truancy. So what can be done about this? Just as I mentioned, a few of these limitations might be trying to stay organized, time management, completing tasks, and managing their ADHD, such as the hyperactivity, or just trying to find better study habits. So here are a few things that I often suggest. First, you got to make a better plan at organizing. It is easy to forget things. Unless it is written down, it doesn't exist. A challenge that many students tell me today is that their assignments are digitalized, or it's on the computer with different platforms such as Canvas. And sometimes it's like here and here and here and here. It's hard to keep up with all of that. When I was in school, something that helped me was to have a school planner or agenda. I absolutely loved it because I would write down the assignment, cross it off when I'm done. It really helped me stay on track throughout the year. I lived for that book because I would write down everything that had to be done in a given due time, the due dates, how much time I can plan for that, and what I needed to remember as well. Well, most students have no idea what that is. They don't know what a planner is or an agenda. They use their mobile devices. And so that's what makes it sad because it really can be helpful. How often do you see teenagers with pen and paper? I mean, that to me, that's the best method. But on Canvas, it is easy to overlook on those assignments. I often encourage even my undergrad students to set notifications for their assignments that have the due dates so that they are able to be reminded, hey, this assignment's coming up and how can I submit it on time? But writing a plan on a calendar or having different assignments with due dates, it can help. And that assignment is not crossed off until it is submitted physically and it's handed in. Otherwise, your brain's going to think and play tricks on you that you completed it even though it was not actually submitted. So positive feedback I do get from teenage clients having ADHD is when they have a physical folder in their backpack. On the folder, on the left side, are assignments that are due or that need to be completed. And when it is done, they would take the paper or the assignments and move it to the right side of the folder. And they don't do it until they know that the assignment's done. That way it's all there and ready to submit for the next day. Having a system will help, and it's important to follow through with consistency because through repetition, it becomes a habit, reducing chaos, increasing predictability as well as stability. So what about teenagers that are getting impulsive or fidgety? This isn't uncommon. They need to release that energy somehow. And so they might wheel around with their legs or tap on their feet. And to some, hey, you're just being annoying. But they're not trying to be annoying. They're trying to get that extra energy out because when they are contained to a small desk in a small room with a bunch of stimulation, it's really hard to get that extra energy out. So when I hear that parents have their child lose out on recess because they're being punished because they didn't finish the assignment or because they were being distracted, I just want to yell and say to the teachers, what is wrong with you? Don't do that. A child needs that time to cope and to regulate and to release that energy. And yet they are being restricted from doing so. Same thing with teenagers. They need to be able to move around. So there are some students with ADHD that can have special accommodations in school, whether it's a 504 plan or an individualized education plan, also known as an IEP. But this is what I say first. Anything can be turned into a fidget. Because a lot of students tell me, I can't take a fidget to class. It is too distracting. It is too annoying. But hey, I say, you can turn anything into a fidget. However, when students learn that anything can be turned into a fidget, they start to learn that they could twirl their hair, or they can pull the strings on the hoodie, just like what I'm doing right now. Or they could tap their fingers together, kind of like this. It releases that tension and something to alleviate that energy. You don't necessarily have to have like a stress ball in your hand or a fidget spinner because you can use really anything. Right now I'm picking this up. I'm feeling the bumps on the remote here, right? So I'm just kind of like moving my hands around, feeling this. Anything can be turned into a fidget. But sometimes it's okay if you have to go to the bathroom, even though you don't really have to go. Because then it gives you a chance to get out, stretch your legs. It gives you a moment to get some water if you feel like you need it, because you're able to get out of the environment that might be noisy or a little chaotic, for that chance to relieve yourselves as well as to regulate yourself and then return to class. But then other students in high school deal with enough stress as it is. So how can you as the parent support your teenager to achieve their goals? But believe me, they want it just as bad. They want those good grades. All they need is support, not to have the stress worsened by scolding. In a 2023 study, almost 3.26 billion people play video games, and 24% of that are under the age of 18. Excessive video game use has caused addictive behaviors. Now, however, gaming disorder is not yet classified as an addiction or a disorder in general due to not having enough research to support it. So I won't say that it is an addiction because it is not, according to the DSM-5, but I will refer it as a behavior. The thing is, video game use has been increased during the COVID-19 pandemic, especially in teenagers with ADHD, have a much higher chance of developing addictive behaviors such as excessive play and overusing of that time. These behaviors have been found to meet 4 motivations, which are socializing, exploration, achievement, as well as disassociation. So let's go ahead and break this down. First, socialization. During the COVID-19 lockdown, children and teenagers were unable to socialize, so they found themselves another way to connect. They couldn't go to the park anymore. They couldn't even go to the playground because everything was on lockdown. So they found some other way to socialize and to play with their friends. So they would play online with their friends through multiplayer gameplay such as Minecraft, Roblox, and even Fortnite. It is not considered a waste of time to them because it is a way to relieve stress, anxiety, loneliness, and even depression. In contrast, others might turn to video games for much different reasons because they may not have the ability to or the opportunity to make friends. But also, they might be too impulsive, they might be too aggressive to play with friends, and others might be too hyperactive around other teenagers and children, and so they might be annoying to other people, and so they just rather spend time playing with themselves during their pastime, such as playing alone, using video games as an outlet, because it can be hard for them to make friends. So, kind of like that kid who likes to play alone during recess time, or the ones that are never picked on the team, they are often the ones that would just rather play video games by themselves or on a social network, because that is a way for them to make friends. Second is exploration. With adaptive gaming, teenagers can play games that seem almost limitless, especially those that have no end, such as Minecraft. There is something that I read that Minecraft and other games like that are called sandbox gameplay. Think of it when you were a kid. A sandbox was a dream because you could create worlds without any limits because you were the creator. You got to use that creative imagination, critical thinking skills, and expanding that creativity. Well, Minecraft is very much the same. It is really no different other than it's digitalized. It's on a game system. Now, I also want you to imagine this, that you are in the zone. You're lost in an alternate reality because you are the creator of this imaginary world and fantasy. But then your mom or your dad calls you in for lunch, or it's getting too dark outside, but you just can't stop playing because you have not yet finished your world. Well, why is this really any different? That is why it's so hard to turn things off, and you got to give your child time or your teenager time saying, hey, it's time to get off. They can't just hit a pause button or just turn it off. They have to get to a save point. They have to get to a certain level to be able to keep all of the things that they have created. Otherwise, everything that they worked for the last hour is gone. I mean, think about that. I don't want to leave my sandbox because if I go in for lunch, I know that Billy Bob is going to come and step all over my world and steal my... So you don't want to leave it. It's almost the same. The third part is achievement. Because remember what I was saying before about creating your own world? Well, now imagine that it is finished. How proud do you feel? Just like finishing a puzzle or a Lego set, it is the same thing with video games. People with ADHD often are deficient in certain brain chemicals called dopamine. It feeds our rewards as well as motivations. When a person is deficient in dopamine, they seek gratification, such as gaming, and sometimes they might even seek out chaos. So, which do we want? Gaming or chaos? Gaming or chaos, right? Because the thing is with gaming, when they beat a level or a game, they find that secret room, whatever it might be, they get that kick and it feels very good for them because they just discovered something and they were rewarded for it. So almost making it a reward, that is what becomes an addictive behavior. Just like with gambling, when you pull that lever and money comes out because you just won something, it becomes very stimulating. And so they want to keep doing it because of the gratification and the dopamine high. So turning to video game, it gives that stimulation on excitement. But on the plus side, for people with ADHD, it can help improve attention as well as visual spatial skills, working memory, fluid reasoning, as well as critical thinking. And then fourth, disassociation. Okay, so this is where it does get bad because video games can be very highly addictive and it can really increase that behavior. So many teens may play for hours, even after their bedtime, till 2, 3, 4 o'clock in the morning, because it has been shown that teenagers who do this start to deteriorate or separate from their family as well as social life. And it reduces academic achievement. They have checked out. Even though they find it as a coping tool, this is what I do think, okay? You are in control of the game. You don't let the game control you. Because when that happens, behavioral intervention strategies might be helpful because we can't fall into that trap because it can be very challenging to pull away from it. But the thing is, behaviors that are often learned can be unlearned. It just has to be replaced. All right, now we're going to move into phones. Now, I hope that this next segment doesn't bring up any hard feelings because it truly can be debatable, and that's not my intention at all. It's all about what the parents want in their home. So I'm going to try my best to explain this from both angles, from the parent as well as the clinician and the child and teenager. Teenagers spend on average up to 8 hours a day on their phones. And according to the American Pediatric Society or Academy, they recommend that they are on their phones for only 2 hours a day. That is the recommended. But yeah, 8 hours. That is roughly 56 hours a week, and that is more than working a full-time job. Excessive phone use has been able to demonstrate negative health outcomes as well as potential risk factors for mental health. Similar to gaming, phones can show addictive behaviors due to digital media. And so I like to call that the digital drug because it is still giving him that dopamine kick. So parents, they do their best. You're doing your best to manage the phone use at home, but oftentimes you may not feel that you're doing good enough because at some point tactics do become harsh, but that just exasperates the issue, and it might even make it more problematic by putting the undesired tensions on the relationships. In a long-term study, researchers have found that among teenagers with or without ADHD have exhibit excessive phone usage that was developing changes in their moods and behaviors, as well as unable to recognize their own emotions, having difficulty being able to identify those feelings, and almost becoming numb or zombie-like because of all of the emotions that come through TikTok, social media, Facebook, all of it. Because teenagers often deal with cyberbullying, comparing themselves with others, poor body image, but even continuously exposed to negativity throughout the world. They know that it is harmful, but they cannot seem to turn it off or pull it away. They just feel stuck. And it's no wonder that parents are worried about their teenager. They have every right to be. And this is something that I have to tell my teenage clients at times. Their parents do what they do because they don't know what else to do. And they don't do it in a way of being controlling. They do it in a way because they are concerned. Now, just like I said, this topic can be debatable because most teenagers share with me that their phone feels that it's just a part of their identity. You take away my phone, you took away a part of me. It is more than just a phone to them. It is how they explore the world. And let me just tell you what they tell me. They say they think that I'm on my phone all the time, but the deal is it's my connection to life. It is my wallet because it has my digital cash and my cards on it. It's also a way of me checking my homework. It's a way that I'm submitting my assignments. It's a way of me getting on the bus system because my wallet's on the card. It is just a way that I'm trying to keep up with society. And so my parents feel that I'm on my phone all the time when I'm actually doing different things on the phone. Now here's the thing, as the teenager, they're not wrong. They feel that their parents are always nagging them because they're constantly on their phone. But this is what they tell me, that they feel that their parents do not understand. Even though it appears that they are on their phone, quote unquote, wasting time, they are listening to music, reading a book or a magazine, listening to a podcast, watching a documentary for homework. They might be even checking their schedules and just checking up on messages, and so on and so forth. So I want you to go back to when you were thinking, I was a teenager once. Yeah, let's go back to the late 90s and early 2000s. Think of a time when you were a teenager. Your parent knew what you were doing. Why? Because if we wanted to search something on the internet, they could see what we were doing on the computer because there was only one computer, at least in most homes. But if we wanted to listen to music, we pulled out our Walkman and we put the cassette in. And if we wanted to read a book, we physically had the book in our hands or a magazine in our hands. And so they can see everything that we're doing. But here's the deal. We now live in a digitalized universe because now everything is compressed into this small little device. And it creates an illusion they are always on their phone when they're actually doing different things. Taking their phone away is like taking away their identity. Just like video games, it is their way to connect with others. So rather than taking it away, maybe you can reduce the ability to use it. So for example, you don't want to completely take away the phone, but maybe you want to reduce the usage of it to make it only for talk and text, and maybe even FaceTime. By not having the other apps, they will reduce their screen time significantly, and it might actually help with improvements, but they still need to be able to contact their friends because they do worry if their texts are not responded or that their phone calls are not being answered. So you might want to reduce the social media, but the thing is, as you notice these changes, you may see behaviors improve if they're really applying themselves because you're allowing your teen to choose what it is that they want. So try this one at a time. When their behaviors start to improve, their grades are getting better, let them choose what they want to do. Dad, I want the music app. Okay, you want music? Okay, I'm going to approve it. A few days later, or maybe a week later, they continue to have improvements with their behaviors. Okay, what do you want now? I want this game app, or I want this app. Okay, let me unlock it or let me approve it. You need to allow them to make the choice on what they want because then they truly appreciate it more and they're more likely to change that behavior because you want to replace the undesired behavior to something that is more desired. But they also have to earn it, but allow them to choose their consequences. But if it were me, I wouldn't approve social media first, like TikTok or Instagram, at least just not yet. Because sometimes you want to take them away from that negativity, such as the cyberbullying or comparison with other kids and teenagers. This might have created the undesired behavior in the first place. Teenagers today are carrying much more of a pressure than most adults actually realize. Some are trying to meet the most impossible tasks because they are expected and told to do so. They are in a very tight spot right now. You're young enough to be considered a child, but old enough to act like an adult. It's a very confusing time for them, especially those that are struggling with ADHD. And others are just trying to escape. They're trying to cope in their games and in their phones simply because it feels like it's the only place that they can breathe and feel safe and just be away for the moment. Behind the grades, the behaviors as well as the screen time is still a teenager asking the one question, am I enough? Maybe the goal is not perfection, control, or punishment, but maybe the goal is about connection with that teenager. Because when a teenager feels misunderstood or misjudged, they need to feel more supported than shame. That is often where growth finally begins. If there is one thing I hope that you take away from this podcast, is that teenagers are not trying to fail. There is no intention that they want to fail. Most of them are trying incredibly hard and they are doing their best, but trying to keep up with those expectations that we as parents set up for them can be very hard and very overwhelming. ADHD, gaming, phones, grades, pressures, identities, it's all connected. And while consequences and boundaries do matter, I will respect that, relationships matter more. Your teenager may not always listen to every word that you say, with or without ADHD, but they will remember how you made them feel. By supporting them goes much further than shame ever will. I hope that this podcast helped you. please consider sharing it with a parent, a friend, or someone that you feel like might need it. And remember, the more curious we become about the mind, the more we understand each other. Until next time, be good to yourself. This podcast is for educational purposes only and not to be a replacement for therapy. If you're struggling and need support, I highly encourage you to reach out to a licensed mental health professional in your area.